Hello, everyone. Good day. I am Mr. Michael Demibi Apirocho, an associate professor from the English language program of the University of Mindanao, and presently a visiting scholar or faculty here in the Modern Languages and Literature Department of the Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington State, in the United States. And I was invited to give a brief lecture on educators' mental health and self-care. So before anything else, it is important for me to give you a glimpse first of the things that I'll be talking about. So here's my outline of the discussion. I'll be talking about the introductory concepts to stress and stress management first, so that we'll have the basic idea on what is stress and what stress management means. And then later on, I'll have to transition to my discussion to stress at work. And then finally, I'll give a lecture, maybe some tips on self-care and mental health, most especially in the context of us being academics or educators in our respective academic institutions. So for the objectives at the end of this discussion, you learners will be able to achieve the following. First one, discuss the concept of stress as a common phenomenon in the workplace. Second, explain the different causes for stress. And third, apply self-care strategies to combat stress in life, most especially in our line of work, which is teaching. So what is stress? Now, this is the common question among us teachers. What is really stress and how does it affect our day-to-day living? Now, stress is the reaction people have to excessive pressure or other types of demand placed upon them. It arises when they worry that they cannot cope. And I think this is really normal for us teachers, regardless of where we are teaching, regardless of who we are teaching, because every day we encounter different levels of workload. Some of us may be playing teachers, while some of us are teachers who are also at the same time handling administrative functions. And because of the workload that we have, because of the expectations that we also face every day in our workplace, we are bombarded with different factors that cause us stress or that trigger our stress. Now, stress is actually the wear and the tear our minds and bodies experience as we attempt to cope with our continually changing environment. So for example, when we are situated in a workplace that is full of expectations, or maybe our colleagues, our supervisors, or our bosses would ask us to deliver something given a short amount of time, sometimes very spontaneous, immediate, or urgent, then that's when we feel stress. So it's very important that we also raise awareness of these stress among ourselves so that we would also know the proper stress management means or measures that we could apply for ourselves. So if we are to remember what stress means, maybe this formula can, summarize everything. So S is equivalent to P, which is greater than the R, or stress occurs when the pressure is greater than the resource. For example, we are expected to deliver a lecture, but we do not have that much time. Or we are expected to do something in the workplace, but we know that in ourselves, we are not really that well capacitated to deliver such a role or activity or task. So it's important for us to also recognize our limits. What can we do given a certain amount of resource, and what can we further or advance given a certain time or a certain period? So stress feelings may include worried. So when you're worried, when you're tense, tired, frightened, elated, depressed, anxious, or even irritated or angry. For example, when you face already piles of work or tons of work to finish in a short period. So that's when we get irritated already, because sometimes we think at the back of our mind, we think that we really cannot accomplish such activities or tasks given the time. It's totally unrealistic. There are also different types of stressors that we need to understand. So we have external and the internal ones. So I'm going to discuss each of these two by starting with the external stressors. So external stressors are these factors that cause us stress, and primarily are those that are obvious around us. For example, physical environment, social interaction, organizational factors, major life events, and even the daily hassles or the errands that we have on a daily basis. For example, when we talk about physical environment, the noise or the extreme silence that we experience, example, when you are recording a lecture and then suddenly there are horns honking or there are people talking loudly, so this could trigger a stress. Bright lights or darkness could also be one factor. For example, when the room is so dim, sometimes it changes our mood. It causes the stress. Or when it's too bright, it also changes our mood. The heat, the hotness, for example, in the Philippines, we know our weather. So sometimes the weather could be a triggering factor for our stress. Even confined spaces or spaces that are too public or too private. This could also be stressors. We also have social interaction. For example, the rudeness of people around us, the rudeness of our students, the bossiness of our supervisors or our principals, the aggressiveness of our colleagues, or the bullying. Okay, sometimes we experience bullying when we are unable to accomplish a certain task. And sometimes we are being smart shamed. Sometimes you are being bullied. You are being intimidated. So things like this, they usually exist in a workplace. There could also be organizational factors. For example, the rules that we follow, the regulations that we follow in our schools, the deadlines. No, this usually causes the stress that we are experiencing. The hierarchy of communication. For example, things need to be urgent, but you have to go through a process, a communication process or the protocol. So you could not do anything about it, but just to follow the hierarchy of communication. Or it could also be the workplace relationships that you have. So if you have more conflicts with people around you in your workplace, then definitely that could be a reason for stress. You also have major life events. For example, when you have given birth to your first child, or when you lost someone, maybe joblessness, or maybe your promotion, that will even trigger stress because of the expectation or the pressure. Marital status change from single to married or married to single, then relationship problems. No, these personal factors could definitely affect our job as teachers or educators as well. Daily hassles. For example, when we do commuting every day, we are 30 minutes late already and we have not seen a jeepney available for riding yet. So it's definitely one major problem that we can face every day. Misplaced objects. When you are in a hurry and then suddenly you could not find your car key, you could not find your door keys. Mechanical breakdowns. You're in the middle of the traffic and then suddenly your car, your vehicle experienced mechanical breakdown, or even the traffic jam that we have there in the Philippines. We also have internal stressors, and not everything is actually external. Some stressors could also be internal, those that are within us. Our choices for the lifestyle that we have, the negative self-talking that we usually do, mind traps, and even the personality traits and the characteristics that we possess as an individual. For example, lifestyle choices. How much caffeine do you have every day? Like, how often do you drink cups of coffee? Like one in the morning, one by lunch, and then another one in the afternoon, or maybe another one before you go to sleep. And that would actually trigger stress, most especially if you are restless or sleepless. So the lack of sleep would also be an internal stressor. Overloaded schedule as well. Sometimes it's our choice to overload our schedule. It's not really the fault at all times of our schools or our principal. We have the choice to say yes or no to individuals. And because we have this kind of Filipino culture that it might be offensive to say no very frequently to people, then we oftentimes say yes or take yes as an answer. And that could be a choice that could affect or impact our lifestyle, which could definitely trigger our stress. And then our jam-packed responsibilities because of our overloaded schedule. There's also this negative self-talk. The more we tell ourselves that we are unable to finish things, the more that we convince ourselves that, you cannot do that one, you cannot accomplish that one, your capacity is limited, things like this. This is actually something that is projecting pessimism, self-criticism, and later on or eventually it will lead to over-analysis or overthinking, which of course as teachers we do not want to happen, because if we overthink, most especially before going to sleep, then it may affect our sleeping patterns. We also have mind traps. Example, unrealistic expectations. I want my portfolio to be at its best. So I have to make it colorful. I have to make it lively. But you are just expected to submit a portfolio. It's not really necessarily something that should be creative or innovative. So sometimes our unrealistic expectations would also hurt us. It would cause so much stress. When we take things personally instead of taking things professionally, it can definitely hurt us as well. For example, when our boss tells us to improve in the next classes that we take or hold, or when we are being told or reprimanded to correct things, and then we take these things personally, it may be a mind trap for us as well. And it can be an internal stressor, which we should avoid at all times. You also have all or nothing thinking. It's like you have two options only. It's either I plunge into it or I retreat. So it's up to you. Now, if you have this kind of thinking, it will also impact you in a way that you have two choices only. So you're being close-minded as to the options or the choices that you can take. Exaggeration could also be a problem. Even rigid thinking. You're being too strict or firm about yourself. You're being too rigid, and that definitely could hurt yourself as well. Now, personal traits, I could not blame people if they have this one because I myself has my own personal trait too. But we need to be mindful also of our personal traits as these may also impact the way we communicate or relate with people and the way we see our job as teachers. For example, when we are perfectionists, when we are individuals who would want everything to be perfect, and when we fail, we just end up frustrating ourselves. We also have the workaholics, those who are overly attached to their job or their work. Sometimes they would say, this is my passion. This is what I really want to do with life or in my life. But sometimes when we have this tendency to be overly attached to our job, to be workaholics, then sometimes we do not give that much time also for ourselves, that personal or me time that we should have or that we deserve. So if we have these personal traits, we need to think twice. Should we continue this way or should I make some modifications with my life, with my patterns, so that I would also improve as an educator? Now, there are also different types of stress. First is the negative stress. Now, stress is a contributory factor in minor conditions such as the headaches that you experience, the abnormalities that you experience with regard to your digestion, skin complaints. Why are there suddenly rashes in the morning? The insomnia, the ulcers. Excessive, prolonged, and unrelieved stress can have harmful effects on mental, physical, and spiritual health. So we do not want these physical illnesses or these diseases to recur because we want to be healthy as educators. So if we want to really educate our students that well, we have to start within ourselves by protecting, by safeguarding our mental, our physical, even our spiritual health. On the other hand, we also have the positive stress. Stress can also have a positive effect, spurring motivation and awareness, providing the stimulation to cope with challenging situations. For example, when you are being motivated with a grade that you get in your master's or PhD, or when you are motivated with the promised promotion that you'll get after you submit all these documents required of you. Things like this. This could be positive stress because it makes you productive or fruitful as a professional. Stress also provides the sense of urgency and alertness needed for survival when confronting threatening situations. So maybe when you make decisions, sometimes you experience this positive stress that will allow you to really have that wisdom on whether to choose this or the other one. Now, as an individual, everyone is different. No, we have unique perceptions of and reactions to different events around us. And there's no single level of stress that is optimal for all people. We cannot say that this is over, this is minimal, this is maximal already. Some are more sensitive owing to experiences in childhood, the influence of teacher, parents, and religion. And let's admit it, once we get to reminisce some of our experiences, this could definitely also impact our stress or our stressors, trigger our stressors. Sometimes when we go back to our experiences or when we have had an experience of something of, for example, pertaining to a current experience, our perception to it may change. And so we have this tendency to perspectivize as well that maybe My experience is unique from the experiences of other people because their perspective, from their angle, they have a different experience of it, or they have a different reaction to it. So we cannot say that my reaction should be the same as yours. My experience should always be the same as yours. So when we tell our colleagues at work, for example, why are you so why are you taking things personally? Should it not be this way? Why don't you blah 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 things like this? Well, that's from our perspective, the very least. It's from our perspective. We are talking from our point of view, from our experience, and not from theirs. So it may not be necessarily applicable, the things that we're advising or recommending or suggesting to them, because we have different experiences. We are unique. And our individuality can actually tell us a lot about how we experience these stressors and how we react to them. Now, most of the stress we experience is definitely self-generated. I don't know if you will agree to this one. How we perceive life, whether an event makes us feel threatened or stimulated, encouraged or discouraged, happy or sad, depends to a large extent on how we perceive ourselves. The more positive self-talk we do, say, you can do it, you can accomplish it, this is just temporary, you'll get through it, things like this. The more we cheer ourselves up, the more that we are actually giving ourselves the energy and the enthusiasm to face stress. On the other hand, the more we feed ourselves with negativity, the more that we are downing ourselves. And so other impacts or symptoms of stress, such as depression or anxiety, comes in. Now, self-generated stress is something of a paradox because so many people think of external causes when they're upset. Usually we say, maybe this is because of the traffic I experienced, or maybe because this is because of the teacher who scolded me in front of the entire faculty, things like this. Now, recognizing that we create most of our own upsets is an important first step towards coping with them. Sometimes we should not blame other people or other things or other instances just because we are feeling or experiencing stress. We need to contemplate as well, is there a reason why I experienced this stress today? Maybe because I overworked. Maybe because I did not set boundaries. Maybe because I said a lot of yeses to people and now I'm juggling a lot of tasks at the same time. Things like this. So we have also the general adaptation syndrome, in which you are being advised to respond to different circumstances depending on the gravity of the situation. So first one, we have alarm response, followed by adaptation, and then the exhaustion. Now let me begin with the alarm response. This is the fight or the flight response that prepares the body for immediate action. For example, when a teacher, your co-faculty, confronts you because of an ongoing or circulating problem in the faculty room. So that teacher approaches you, tells you things, channels his or her emotions to you, and then for you, you feel like it's too much. So what will be your decision given the situation? Will it be a flight or a flight? So when you say fight, then you have to be engaged with the confrontation. So you talk back to the teacher, you defend your side, you tell things about the situations, you communicate. But if it's a flight, you would tell yourself that I don't want any issue, I want peace, I want to do other stuff, I want to do stuff other than fighting or pursuing with this conflict with this co-faculty or co-teacher. So it's up to you as to which choice you will be taking. But you have to consider also that every choice you make will have its corresponding consequence. So after that, that is where adaptation comes in. If the source persists, the body prepares for long-term protection, secreting hormones to increase blood sugar levels. That's why we get hyped up. That's when we get too enthusiastic about the situation. Now, this phase is common and not necessarily harmful, but must include periods of relaxation and rest to counterbalance the stress response. Fatigue, concentration lapses, irritability, and lethargy result as the stress turns negative. So going back to the scenario I provided you a while ago, For example, if you're in a confrontation, in the midst of the confrontation, what will you do? Is it a fight or a flight? Now, if you choose fight, what will you do while you are in the confrontation? Will you keep talking, or will you just limit the words that you are going to say and then try to settle things immediately so that things will not go uncontrollably? So in this example, you have to adapt to the situation. So you have to go with whatever measures you feel like you're confident using given the situation, and then try to, of course, slow things down, and then contemplate if this will be the right decision to make or if this will be the right action to take. And then once you're already hyped up, like, I'm so into it, I want to fight this teacher back, I want to tell this teacher that you're wrong, that I'm right. So if you're in this situation, maybe you have to relax for a while so as not to allow yourself to experience what's really uncontrollable, or maybe to balance the emotions and the thoughts that you have. We also have exhaustion. Now, in chronic stress situations, sufferers enter the exhaustion phase. Emotional, physical, and mental resources suffer heavily. The body experiences adrenal exhaustion, leading to decreased stress tolerance, progressive mental and physical exhaustion, illness, and collapse. Now, in a scenario like this, of course, you will have to feel like you are physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted. Now, going back to the example I provided you, it's maybe like you get tired eventually of talking to this teacher and you just want everything to be settled. So that's the exhaustion phase. So if you're faced with stress, you have to be ready to face these phases. That way, you would really become an effective individual in terms of handling or addressing your stressors. So here are some symptoms of stress. Physical symptoms, those that are mental, behavioral, and emotional. So I'm going to present each of these symptoms. For the physical symptoms, it could be dizziness, fainting, swelling and trembling, tingling hands and feet, breathlessness, palpitations, missed heartbeats, the changes with your sleep patterns, fatigue, digestion changes, loss of sexual drive, headaches, aches and pains, infections, indigestion. And for teachers like us, we normally feel this. Sometimes we have go-tos with us. For example, applying ointments, applying different therapeutic oils on our body because we feel like relaxed the moment we do things like this. Applying patches on our skin so that we would feel relieved of the back pain, the shoulder pain, things like this. So physical symptoms are normal, most especially when you are facing enormous stress in your life. Mental symptoms is, I would say, the one that is sometimes too difficult to handle. When you are stressed, you might have, or you might experience lack of concentration. You might not be able to focus that well. Memory lapses, you become forgetful of things. Difficulty in making decisions, confusion, disorientation, even panic attacks in relation to anxiety. Behavioral symptoms may include, changes with your appetite. It's either you stress eat or you eat little. Eating disorders such as anorexia or bulimia, increased intake of alcohol and other drugs, increased smoking, restlessness, fidgeting, nail biting, hypochondria. And apart from this, there are also some emotional symptoms such as bouts of depression. You feel like you're so down. You feel so low about yourself. You suddenly feel impatient about things. You get easily irritated. Fits of rage, worse, tearfulness. Sometimes you cry out of nowhere. Things like this will definitely affect you mentally and emotionally. And deterioration of your personal hygiene and appearance. Because you're depressed, you do not want to take a bath, you do not want to eat, you do not want to brush your teeth, things like this. So we need to really be careful with these symptoms. If you're experiencing this, then we have to seek professional help or tap our support systems. So how do we control our stress? So it's as simple as ABC, but as you may think, it's not actually simple when you are already there, when you are facing stress yourself. First is awareness. What causes your stress and how do you react? So you have to contemplate also what are the different stressors in your everyday life and how do you react to each of these stressors. Balance is also one. How much can you cope with before it becomes negative? How do you address it? Do you wait for things to worsen, or do you immediately address things so that you won't experience further stress in your life? And C is for control. What can you do to help yourself combat the negative stress? So it's more on the mechanism, the strategies that you'll be employing so that you'll get over the stress that you're experiencing. So some stress management techniques would include changing your thinking. If you have a positive mindset or positive mentality, I think it will be easier for you to, have a positive outlook of things, have a positive perspective of things. They say you always look at the silver lining. So if you experience stress, maybe you would tell yourself, maybe this experience is teaching me something, or maybe I'm going to learn something out of this bad experience. I will not stress out. I will not really be stressed about these things happening to my life. Changing your behavior as well. So you have to, be enthusiastic, be more energetic despite the depression that you are facing. Although these are valid, the mental health issues or conditions that you're experiencing are all valid, but you have to start changing your behavior. That way, you'll become more positive as well. And then finally, you have to change your lifestyle. So there might be some changes, adjustments, or modifications that you have to make with regard to your eating, sleeping, socializing, things like this. So when you change your thinking, you have to do reframing and positive thinking. So when you say reframe, it's like, personally, I'm doing this one, the reframing part. When I experience a problem, what I usually do is that I don't see problems as problems. I see them as learning experiences. These are provided to me because I know that I'll be learning something from it. It may be too difficult to accept at first, but the moment you're already there, you get to appreciate the process and you get to see that after this one, I'm going to learn something. And maybe this something is something that I can apply in my life. So reframing will definitely help a lot in order for you to achieve positive thinking as well. And if you feed yourselves with so much positive mentality every day, then there's no space or room in your life for stress or other stressors. You have to change your behavior as well. Be assertive. And when you say being assertive, it does not mean that you always have to be in conflict with people. Be assertive means believing in what you believe in and trying to assert it to people in a nice or polite way. Because sometimes it may stress you out when you are just adhering to whatever people tell you to do, or you are just saying yes to everything. So being assertive about yourself, about your principles, about your strengths of belief will help a lot. Of course, sometimes we Filipinos have problems with our time management. And as teachers, this is really common. So we have to get organized and we have to manage our time well so that we would not experience further stress. Ventilation or channeling the stress could also be one way. So you look for support systems. You tell them what your experience looks like. You tell them the gravity or the seriousness of the experience so that, you're relieving yourself of the pain of the mental state that you really don't want to have, things like this. And humor. So you have to inject humor. No, watching TikTok videos that are funny, watching random Facebook videos, reels that are funny can, inject that positivity in you as well. And of course, look for diversion and distraction. This technique is very helpful because if you keep on diverting your attention to something more productive or fruitful, I think there's no room for stress in your life. You can easily get rid of stress because you're too busy doing things. But the problem there really is when you are too hooked up in doing something, you might be experiencing another round or series of stress. So you'll have to apply other or maybe similar techniques that can help you. You have to change your lifestyle as well. As teachers, we need to have good diet. We need to minimize, if not totally eradicate, smoking and alcohol drinking in our life or system. Exercising, sleep, leisure, and of course, do not be selfish to yourself. Relax whenever necessary. So the last slide or the last set of slides that I'll be presenting is actually based on a presentation made by a guidance counselor from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. And I'm giving credits to her for this portion of the discussion, which I am going to relay to all of you. So this is self-care and psychoeducational support. And I wish to talk about World Health Organization's definition of mental health. You know what? Mental health is not just the absence of illness. Okay, mental health is defined as a state of well-being, being in which the person can tackle the normal difficulties of life. You can tap support systems and tell them, this is my mental health, it's deteriorating, it's damaging us of this time, so I think I need to work out on whatever measures I need to take so that I could, address whatever mental health needs I have. It's also when the person is aware of his or her own abilities, because when you're depressed or when you have a mental health condition, I think it'll be difficult for you to determine or still distinguish those that you can accomplish or those that you could not. A person can also work productively if he or she has good mental health or healthy mental state. Is able to contribute to his or her community as well. Because if you're a person who has great mental health situation, then it's easier for you to do or to perform at your best on a daily basis. So we need to understand as teachers the importance of self-care. Sometimes we are very focused on the self-care or on the tips or the recommendations that we provide with students that we forget about ourselves. Maybe it has something to do with our vocation as teachers. We're very selfless. We always think about teachers, parents, Philippine education, things like this. And sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves. So self-care is definitely important in our line of work. So we should not disregard this one. Self-care means the practice of taking an active role in protecting, preserving, and improving one's own well-being and happiness. So we always have this decision whether or not to stay loving of ourselves. In our line of work, we may not be able to fully see the importance of self-care, but this is one good way for us to acknowledge that we should not be disregarding our mental health and other aspects of our health too. So there are 8 types of self-care, and I want you to listen very closely to this one as some of these may be applicable to you. First is the physical self-care. This may involve movement of the body, health, nutrition, physical and sexual needs. Now, as teachers, this may be difficult. This may be a big challenge because we wake up very early in the morning so that we can go to school for our duty from Monday to Friday. And sometimes we do not have that much time to exercise. But there are other forms of physical self-care, such as simply walking from your classroom to another building or taking the stairs instead of taking the elevators. So this can help a lot for us to be physically fit as well. Emotional self-care involves emotional literacy, navigating emotions, managing stress, developing compassion for self and others. And being mindful of our emotional aspect could also help us, be engaged with other people and establish stronger relationships with them. Sometimes we do not notice this, but when we get too grumpy, when we get too irritated or negative about things, our relationships are also heavily affected. So we need to be mindful of that and tone down with whatever emotional outrage we have. Next is the social self-care. This involves having supportive group, feeling of belongingness and connectedness. That is why we can always go back to our family, our support systems, our friends, because we feel like it is where we are being understood. It is where we feel like there's inclusion, there's belongingness. And these two are very important for in addressing our stressors. Psychological self-care involves starting a new hobby, practicing mindfulness, engaging intrinsic motivation, and practicing creativity. It's when we give ourselves some treats. We draw something, we paint something, we do beadworks. Things like this can definitely help us psychologically. Environmental self-care, on the other hand, involves sense of safety and security, having a clean and organized home and work environment, well-maintained transport system. Personally, I do not want my desk to be untidy, so whenever I start working, I have to make sure that everything's tidied. So everything's arranged, sorted out, because if I would see that there are a lot of, you know, if I'm being if I'm being disorganized with my stuff on the desk, definitely I could not function well. So you have to also take a look at that. Maybe you can go throwing things that may be unnecessary so that you'll feel more spacious in your working environment. Spiritual self-care also involves beliefs and values that are important to you and guide your life, pursuing noble goals and practicing spiritual awareness. So, because we are busy people, we also need to take note that this is something that we should not compromise or we should not give up. Our spiritual connection with whoever God we have may be very helpful in order for us to hold on to the strings of beliefs that we have. And for us, religion could have a big impact on our principles as well. Financial self-care. This is really a big issue for us teachers. For those teachers who have been loaning sums of money, so I think it's time for us to contemplate on this one. This one involves being responsible with our finances and having a conscious relationship with money. So overspending could be a problem. Or when we do not go with whatever budget we have set for a certain period, then that could be a problem or a stressor too. So we have to be financially knowledgeable, financially intelligent. And of course, professional self care should be there. This involves sharing your strengths and gifts, knowing your professional boundaries, and attending to own professional development. So when you attend webinars, seminars, or trainings, that's part of professional self care. And once you feel like you're learning something or that you're acquiring new skills or competencies, that's when your confidence is being boosted. And so you feel great about yourself and you disregard already stress in your life. So self-care practices and activities could take many forms. It could be asking for help, spending time alone. The me time is very important. Putting yourself first, self-priority or prioritizing yourself, asking for what you need, setting boundaries, staying at home, saying no to people whenever your schedule is pretty messed up. So you have to make sure that if it's too fit already, if it's too tight already, then you have to say no to people. Forgiving yourself also for the frustrations that you might have caused yourself, and then taking a step back. It's definitely helpful. So sleep well. That's part of physical self-care. Ideally, we should have enough sleep. But I'm not really sure with the case of other teachers because this may be very challenging for them, most especially if they work overtime. You have to eat well as well because our diet can definitely have an impact on our mood and other physical activities. We also need to practice tea time. But what is this tea time? That's part of the emotional self-care. So T stands for thoughts, emotions, and actions. Being aware of our thoughts, emotions, and actions can help us also evaluate if the things that we are doing on a daily basis causes stress or not. Because if we always think about applicability of certain strategies or applicability of certain things without being fully aware of our thoughts, emotions, and actions, then everything's going to be pointless. So this T here, or the cognitive triangle, can guide us to ensuring that our thoughts, emotions, and actions are all balanced. Have a gratitude jar. Although I'm not doing this myself, but this can be a very helpful activity for some teachers. So before you go to sleep, grab maybe a sticky note or a small sheet of paper, and then you write there, what is it that you're thankful for that day? Okay, maybe you accomplish your portfolio. You were able to mark or grade your students. You were able to have a consultation with 10 students for that day. So these are things that you should be grateful for. So write them down and then put them in your gratitude jar. And then maybe the next day you can reread those notes and you feel like, oh, I'm making progress. I'm undergoing and enjoying the process. So I must be okay. This could definitely affect also your self-positive self-talk. Ask for help. That's part of social self-care too. If you feel like you're being bombarded with tasks already, delegate tasks. Or if you feel like you're being alone, isolated from people, then ask for the help of your support systems, your family, your friends, or your colleagues in the workplace. You can also schedule a group date. It's not necessarily romantic, but you can do this with your peers or your friends or your co-faculty members. And then, of course, read a book. Okay, not necessarily textbooks or books that are required in your subject or courses, but anything that is fictional, entertaining, something that would definitely stir up, the curiosity in your mind and would bring you to another dimension the moment you start reading. Declutter as well. Decluttering can help a lot. As what I mentioned a while ago, when your desk is untidy, you cannot focus, you cannot concentrate. So you have to declutter, minimize the things that you think are not necessary anymore. So you have to get rid of them. Then clean your house because a dirty place can eventually lead to lack of focus in the workplace. So you have to clean your house so that, of course, it will have a positive impact on you being a person or a member of that household. Meditate. Okay, you can do this one in the morning, the moment you wake up, by simply thinking of the things that you want to accomplish for that day, or the things that you want people to experience from you, the things that you might have done, for example, incorrectly or wrongly in the past. Contemplating or meditating on these things can also be very helpful for you. You can reflect in a journal, so you can write down your thoughts, your emotions for that day. And then the next day, you can read it again and you can tell yourself, oh, I made it. I actually made it. It's going to be helpful. Save so that we will not experience any financial issue or problem. Spend wisely. Know your boundaries. Know when you are tired. Know when you truly need some sleep. Know when it's already too much for you to take. Know when it's already mentally or emotionally painful for you. You have to know your boundaries. As teachers, it may be difficult, but setting boundaries can help us maintain our mental health. You can also attend seminars so that you learn more about things. And the more that you are professionally fulfilled, the more that you are, the more that you would feel happier about things happening around you. Now, to close this short lecture, I want to remind all of you that self-care is something that we should not disregard as teachers. Being selfless professionals, we teachers have this tendency of forgetting about taking good care of ourselves. But remember, our syllabi, our course discussions, the assignments or tasks we ask our students to accomplish, the learning experience that our students can experience, among others, will definitely impact us. So these are all important. So we need to start within ourselves by making sure that we are giving ourselves that well-deserved self-care. Self-care is a personal journey with each day always changing. Thus, it is important to make it a habit to look after yourself and reflect on your health and well-being. This way, the more that you're reflective of your well-being, the more that you are aware of the things that you can do to combat stress in your life. So to all my fellow educators, let us always remember that whatever you are going through now, it's valid, it's normal, it's part of the life that we have, it's part of the process that we are taking and we are yet to take. We just need to look at the silver lining. We just need to think positively about things, regardless how negative things or how messed up things could become. We just need to be positive. Feed our soul and our mind with so much positivity, and that's actually part of the self-care. Self-care is very important, so we should not disregard this because our line of work is, of course, very heavy for some of us to take. It may be too difficult also for the new teachers or educators to adjust to, a new work or a new profession or vocation. So self-care can be your go-to buddy. It's always there to help you that you need to relax, to give yourself a pat on the back, or to reward yourself with something, maybe a good night's sleep, uh, a night without the use of any technology, a day without opening work emails, things like this. So again, as educators, give ourselves so much importance, value self-care, because this is not only for ourselves, but also for our family, our students, and the entire country. So I hope that you have learned something from this one. Thank you very much. And again, if you have anything to ask regarding this discussion, you can always send me an email through my personal email. I'm going back to my title slide. Okay, this one. So I have my email address here. You can send me an email if you have questions or if you have anything to collaborate with in this line of work. So you can always approach me virtually. Once again, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak, and I hope that you have learned something from this brief lecture. Have a great one.